After a little while of talking about it, during my senior year of high school, my parents decided to move into a new home that they had built, one that they built. And they moved in there during my senior year, and they still live there actually to this day. But we had this one little issue when we moved, and that was that our old house sold about 4 months before our new house was going to be complete. Which means that we had this gap here of a few months where we needed to find a place to be able to live. We needed somewhere to stay until that new house was built. Fortunately, there's a family from my church that had this second home that was just outside of city limits, and they were kind enough to let us stay there for a few months while we were waiting for our other home to be built there. And this house that they had for us, it wasn't big at all, but it was nice and it was comfortable, it was cozy, it was a good little place to stay, and it worked out really well for us for a few months while we were there. There was just this one issue with that house, and that's that it was a little bit creepy. Not so much the house was fine, but the location of the house. As I mentioned to you, the house actually sat outside of city limits, and so in order to get to it, what you would do is you would drive up to the edge of town, and then there was this kind of long winding road that went off into this wooded area, and you would drive that until it kind of curved around, and then over on your left, there was this little gate that you would turn into and go down this long driveway, about a quarter of a mile or more, winding even deeper back into the woods before you would come upon this little house. And during the daytime, things were actually not that bad. It was pretty nice out there and peaceful. It sat close to this old kind of rundown park there called Hopewell, and there were some urban legends about some pretty creepy things that went on out there, and so that was a little bit unsettling, but during the day, honestly, it was really pretty nice out there. It was when the night came that things got a little bit scary for me. And I think part of that is just because of me. Because I grew up within the city limits all my life, and so that's kind of all I knew was that. And when you grow up in city limits, you walk outside at night and you think it's dark. But the truth is there's always some kind of street light or porch light on over your head or a business sign lighting up the sky in some way. It's never fully dark, but then when you step out into the country, when you step out into the woods, then you finally get to see just how dark the night can truly be. And I didn't like it very much. The family had this rule that the last one home for the night had to lock up the gate behind them out there on that driveway because they also had a big shed with a lot of equipment on it. And they didn't want anybody going in and stealing that stuff. And so the last person always had to lock up, and I hated being the last person in. Because I hated that I would have to get out of my car there in the middle of the woods and walk back to this gate. And this is before, of course, we had like cell phones with flashlights on them. And so all I had was the faint red glow of my Chevette's taillights there to kind of light up that gate. And I would be fumbling around looking for the chain and trying to get the padlock together, and my hands would be shaking as I'd be trying to get it locked as quickly as I could before an axe murderer came out of the woods and killed me, you know? And I remember anytime I knew that I was going to be the last one in and I was going to have to lock it up, I would always try to find the like bubbliest, cheesiest pop song I could on the radio, Britney Spears or NSYNC or Backstreet Boys, and I would just crank it as loud as I could as I pulled up there and got out to lock it. Because I figured, you know, in the horror movies, like nobody ever gets axe murdered to a Backstreet Boys song, right? And so my thinking is that as long as the Backstreet Boys are singing I Want It That Way, I'm probably safe. And so I would do that as much as I could to keep myself like from getting too freaked out. My brothers and I, we had this game that we would play. And we would, on particularly dark nights, we would drive out onto the driveway. If it was one of those nights where the moon wasn't out and the stars were maybe covered up by the clouds, it would get really dark out there. And so we would drive out onto the driveway, and then we would kill the lights in my Chevette there. And it would be so dark that you couldn't, as they say, see your hand in front of your face. And we would do this thing where we would just sit there and see how long we could sit there in the darkness and in the silence until one of us got freaked out and said, okay, turn it on. And I always had this fear that one of those days, one of those nights, I was going to turn the headlights back on in my car and there would be someone or something standing out in the driveway in front of my car. And then one night it happened. My cousins had come to visit us for like the weekend, and we were hanging out there, and we decided to go to the movies. And so we were driving into town, but we were coming out on that driveway, and it was one of those dark nights where it was so dark you couldn't even see in front of you. And so we said, hey, you want to see something? And we stopped and we turned the headlights off, and we just sat there in the driveway for a second. And it was so dark and so quiet. And after a few moments, one of the cousins was like, all right, you got to turn it on. That's too much, And I turned on the lights, and at first there was nothing there. It was clear. Then I remember I started to put the car in gear and I started to move forward when kind of out of nowhere this beast came lunging out of the darkness right out in front of our car. And this Chevette full of high school boys began to scream like little schoolgirls as I realized in this split second like my greatest nightmare was coming true right before my eyes as we were all panicking and freaking out until we realized that this vicious beast from the darkness was actually a tiny deer scampering through the woods. But you would have thought that that tiny deer was some sort of chainsaw serial killer by the way we were screaming like girls, and by the way perhaps one or two of us may or may not have peed our pants a little bit. I can neither confirm nor deny. What I can confirm to you is that that was the last time my brothers and I played that game out on the driveway. What is it about the darkness that makes us so afraid? When you're a kid, one of the first things you ever learn to be scared of is the dark. I say learn to be afraid. You don't actually learn. No one has to teach you. You just do that naturally. It comes intuitively to be afraid of the dark. And for many of us, we never fully outgrow that. I mean, you can take a nice stroll through the woods on a bright summer day, and it's peaceful, and it's serene, and it's relaxing, but you walk through those same woods at midnight, and all of a sudden you feel your heart rate going up, and you hear noises behind every tree. You keep looking over your shoulder. Same place, same activity. The only difference is the dark. Why is that? What is it about the dark that so unnerves us? Well, I think the most basic answer to that question is that in the darkness, we don't know what's there. See, when you're a kid and you're playing in your room, you can look around and be confident that everything's okay, but at nighttime, when you're laying in your bed and the lights are out, you don't know for sure. Maybe there really is a monster in your closet. Maybe there really is a monster under your bed. You just don't know, and that's what's so terrifying. But I think there's a deeper reason, actually, for our fear of the dark. I think that deep down in our hearts, every one of us knows that we weren't meant for the dark. Oh, sure, you can sleep in the dark at night. You can do it for a short period, but to live there, to just dwell in darkness long term, we weren't meant for that. We weren't made for that. We were made for the light. Light is one of the fundamental components of life on planet Earth. And that's why I think the biblical writers, and especially John, he likes to use this word light as a metaphor for God. Take, for example, 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. It says this: "This is the message we heard from Jesus and now declare to you. God is light, and there is no darkness in him at all." What John's saying when he says that, he's not saying that God is literally light beams or light particles. He's trying to say in this one word that all these things, life and truth and hope and purity, all the things that sustain the human soul are found in God. But the sad story of humanity is that one day sin entered the world and then entered in our hearts, and something got twisted inside of us. And we began to think that we could find all of those things, joy and hope and life, somewhere apart from God. And so we plunged ourselves into the darkness seeking those things, and what we found when we got there was the opposite of all of that. We found hate We found death. We found fear. We found sorrow. Everything against those things. And listen, the Bible says that that's true, but here's the real truth. You don't even need the Bible to know that. All you need to do is turn on the TV. All you need to do is scroll through your news feed. When you hear about a young man walking into a school and gunning down 17 of his classmates, when we read about Islamic militants in Africa going and raiding an all-girls school and taking those girls out into the darkness of the jungle, never to be seen from again, when you watch the news and you see the way that people in our own country treat others who look or think differently than them, it becomes very obvious what the darkness has done to us. But can I be real honest with you? The truth is, I don't even need the news to tell me that. All I need is a mirror. Because I know firsthand what the darkness has done in my own life. Things I have done and the things I have said or thought that I carry deep regret and shame over. And my guess is everyone in this room is in that same boat. That all of you know firsthand things that have gone through your mind, things you've done or said that maybe nobody else in this room even knows about, but you know. And you know exactly what the darkness has done to your own soul. And you know exactly the weight and the shame of that. Here's the good news, though. The Bible says that when we ran from God, he did not just leave us in the darkness. He didn't abandon us to that. But in love, he pursued after us, that through his son Jesus, he actually stepped into our darkness. And when Jesus came, he brought the light with him. John says it like this in his gospel: in him, that's Jesus, was life. And that life was the light of man. Like he says, like in the same way that flowers open up to the sun to receive its light, that's what happens inside the human soul when Jesus comes and shines his light in them. But the cool thing is, Jesus didn't just come to shine light on us, he came to bring us into the light with him. He says in John 12:46, I have come so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. Finally, after thousands of years of stumbling around in the darkness, wandering in fear, finally, light had burst forth into our world. But here's the weird thing. You would think that after thousands of years of darkness, you would think that after a world full of fear and hate and all of those things, that when the light comes, that when Jesus steps in, that we would be clamoring to get to him, that we would run to that light with everything we have. But that's not what happened, and it's not what happens today. John says in John 3:19, and this is the judgment: the light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light. Which makes no sense. Don't you know what the darkness is? Don't you know what you've been living in? Why would you choose that over the light? It makes no sense until you read the very next verse. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. In other words, John says, yeah, it's true, we fear the dark because we don't know what's there. But we also fear the light because we know exactly what's there. Because I know that the moment I step into the light of Jesus, that who I really am in here is going to be exposed to him and to me. And I'm not sure if I want to deal with that. I know that if I choose to come into the light and follow Jesus, that has the potential to turn my entire world upside down. And I'm not sure if I want that. And so I might not really like the dark all that much, but at least it's comfortable over here. And so John said that Jesus' coming actually ends up dividing the world into two different categories. There are this first category of people, which are those people who see Jesus as he actually is, the Messiah, the Son of God who died for the sins of the world, rose again, and now reigns over it as king. And they have put their faith and trust in him. And John says those are the people who live in the light. But then there's a second category, and that is these people who reject Jesus, who refuse to acknowledge him or obey him, who want to live their own life over here. And so those, John says, walk in the darkness. But actually, in the text that you memorized just a little bit earlier, John hints that there's actually probably a third category. There's this other group of people who look like they live in the light, who act like they live in the light. They do all the right things. They say all the right things. They go to church. They go to youth group. They've grown up in a Christian family all their life. They might even think that they live in the light, but the truth is they actually dwell in darkness. Which brings up this million-dollar question: how do you know? How do you know what category a person fits in? And more importantly, how do you know what category you fit in? Well, the good news is that's one of the main reasons that John wrote this letter, was to help people know whether or not they are in the light, that they might know that they have eternal life. And throughout his letter, John continually comes back to these three things, these three litmus tests for determining whether a person is in light or in the darkness. The first thing he says is you can know by what you believe. That is, do you believe that Jesus is actually the Son of God? Do you believe he died for our sins? Do you believe that he rose again? Do you believe that he reigns? If so, that's a sign you're leaning towards the light. The second, he says you can know by how you live. So if you believe these things about Jesus, then are you lining your life up with him? Are you seeking to obey him? Are you seeking to try and follow after him? Not perfectly all the time, but are you seeking to grow? And then the third test he gives is this: you can tell by who you love. Specifically, do you love God's people? Do you love the people of God? Now, we're going to talk about those first two things a little bit more as this week goes on, but our text today focused on the third, who you love. And so I want to take just a few minutes to talk through that as we launch out into this week. 1 John 2, starting in verse 9, says this: if anyone claims I am living in the light but hates a fellow believer, that person is still living in darkness. Anyone who loves a fellow believer is living in the light and does not cause others to stumble. But anyone who hates a fellow believer is still living and walking in darkness. Such a person does not know the way to go, having been blinded by the darkness. Have you ever heard someone say something like this? You know, I love God. I believe in God. I trust in Him. I consider myself to be a spiritual person. I pray and I read my Bible and I want to do what's right. So I love God. I just don't like Christians very much. I don't really connect with Christians. I don't really get them. They seem just overly kind of harsh or judgmental. Or maybe you've heard somebody say something like, you know, I love Jesus. Jesus was a wonderful person. I love him, a great teacher. I try to follow after him. I would even consider myself to be a Christian. I just can't stand the church. I've been too hurt by the people in the church. I don't like who's going on there. Maybe you've heard somebody say that. Maybe you've even said that. And if so, sorry, John's about to make it awkward. Because John repeatedly says in his letter that that statement is a lie. That you cannot possibly love God while hating his people. That you cannot love Jesus, the groom, while hating his bride, the church. Those two things go hand in hand. So I ask you this morning, as we start our week, how are your relationships? Are there people in the church, maybe people in this room, that you're at odds with? Someone in here that every time they walk past, you find yourself rolling your eyes or feel your blood starting to boil a little bit. Someone you just can't stand, and maybe you don't really have a reason why. Maybe you have 100 reasons why. Maybe they wronged you, and yes, they asked for forgiveness, but you just can't find it in your heart to forgive them. Or maybe it's not someone that you don't like. Maybe there's just people in the church that you kind of know, and they're there, but the truth is you're just not very kind to them, and not for any real reason. It just is what it is. John says if that's you, you need to be careful because that's a sign that you are leaning into darkness. You're not being loving. But actually, he says there's more than one way to be unloving. Look again at what he said in verse 10. Anyone who loves a fellow believer is living in the light and does not cause others to stumble. So John says that if you truly love somebody, that you're going to want what is best for them, which means you're going to want to help them into the light without them stumbling. And so John says, I don't care how much you say you love your boyfriend or your girlfriend. If you're doing things with that person that you know you shouldn't be doing because you're not married to them, you're not loving them. I don't care how much you like hanging out with your buddies, how much you say you really enjoy your friends. If you are pressuring them into temptation, if you're showing them that picture or that video on your phone that they don't need to be seen, John says that's unloving. If you've got a friend who's a Christian, but they are living in unrepentant sin, that they're just embracing a lifestyle of sin, and you don't want to be judgmental, and you don't want to be self-righteous, so you try to just support them and kind of affirm them in the life that they're choosing. John says that that is unloving, and it is a sign of walking in darkness. Listen, the Bible is clear over and over again that our relationship with God is connected to our relationship with people. So if what you want this week is to hear from God, is to see Him, is to know Him more, then I would encourage you that some of you, the best thing you could do to start this week off is find that brother or that sister that you're at odds with and make things right, to make amends before we move forward. Because see, there are two different ways to live. There are those who live in the light because they trust and believe Jesus and they seek to follow and obey Him. And many of you in this room fit in that category. And I am so glad for that. I praise God for that. And my prayer for you this week is that you would see Jesus more and more this week, that you would know Him more and that you would experience greater joy in Him as you walk deeper into the light with Him. But then there's some of you who fit in this other category. Maybe it's because you're new to this whole Jesus thing and you're really not sure if it's legit or not. And that's okay. There's time. We can talk through this and hear some of these things. I hope you get to listen to this. Maybe you're one of those people who's acting like you live in the light when you know that you're really in the dark, and that's not okay. But whatever it is, John says that you are in the darkness. And my heart and my prayer for you this week is that you will know this, that no matter how comfortable you may be in the dark, that you will never be at home there because you weren't made for it. You weren't meant to live there. You were meant to be somewhere else with someone else. So my youngest daughter, Hadley, I mentioned, she's 5 years old. She's been doing this thing for the last month or two where every other night she's waking up in the middle of the night and she's scared, and so she comes into our room. And we got a rule that she's not supposed to climb into our bed while we're sleeping there. We've made a little pallet on the floor next to the bed that she's supposed to go lay down and sleep on. But a lot of times we're sleeping so heavy that she can just kind of sneak into the bed and get there in between us. And I don't realize it until I wake up with a foot in my back at 3 in the morning, or until I'm getting pushed off the edge of the bed. And it's a little crazy. We're trying to help her and trying to stop that a little bit. But do you want to know why Hadley does that? Hadley does that because when little kids are scared, they want one of two things more than anything else in the world. Either they want light in the middle of the darkness. They want a night light, or they want someone to open the door or hit the light switch on. They want to have light, or they want the presence of their parents. They want to be with their father. They want to be with their mother because they know when they're with their parents, everything is going to be okay, that they'll be all right. Listen, I believe this, that deep down, every one of us wants the same thing. In the middle of our darkness, every heart is crying out to be in the light and to be in the presence of our Father. And here's what I want you to know. I believe that if you will quiet yourself and listen this week, that you will hear your soul crying out for those two things. But the good news is you'll also hear Jesus saying, I came to bring you both. I came that you might have my light and your Father again, to come back to Him. You don't have to spend your life wandering around in the darkness, in the sorrow, in the fear, in the hate. No, you can come to me. You can know me. You can follow me. Step into the light.